Following great mixing advice can still lead to a bad mix. So let's mix this pop punk song with good intentions but purposely fall into some common traps. So this is what we're working with, completely unmixed. And now we're going to follow some good advice and make it sound worse. While mixing these drums, we will regularly mix in solo, make absolutely everything sound massive, over EQ the programmed drums and ignore the room tracks. So let's go. So if we look here, there are layers of samples for the kick and snare. What I'm going to do to make sure we make a common mistake here is get rid of those and go with just the one kick sound and just the one snare sound. So now we have just the kick in and kick out tracks from GGD, Modern and Massive, good samples. Now we're going to get rid of this snare and stick with the One Kit Wonder Pop Punk snare from GGD. We also have an SSD room here. We'll get rid of that too. And we have a kick room here, which would also be a good idea. So we'll get rid of that too. The point I'm trying to make here is that these layers and extra little bits that you can chuck in with your samples to make them sound like real drums are often overlooked. So let's hear the drum tracks now, all pretty much from Modern and Massive with the exception of the One Kit Wonder snare. So you have a well-balanced, snappy kick drum, good snare. But what I hear a lot of is EQing that kick drum and snare to make it sound big in the right areas. But what it actually does is it kind of throws off that whole sound because it sounds cool already. It doesn't need that much doing to it. You know, they're programmed drums. They're really well recorded samples. So without listening in context to the guitars, let's EQ this kick drum for almost no reason. So I'm using this SSL channel from Waves, which I actually love using and I think gets really good results. So let's follow some common frequencies to boost and make this first mistake. First of all, it wouldn't be crazy to think it needs more low end in that. The low end of the kick lives around 60 to 80 hertz, sometimes as low as 50. So let's do that. Let's do 50 and let's bump this up to what we think sounds good. There we go. So around, 9, 12 decibel boost, that got a bit too crazy. So we'll bring it back to 7. I think that sounds reasonable. And now other good advice would be to pull out the sort of 200-300 hertz area, as was often done in metalcore and things like that. So we're going to pull that area out now and really tighten up that low end of the kick. See, now you really hear that low end come through when we kill that sort of 200 or 270 hertz that we've killed there. Let's listen to that off and on and you'll see how tight and good that sounds in solo. Now surely that's a good move, right? How could that possibly be bad? More on that as we progress. So now you may have also heard 8K around there, 8K to really get that clicky presence of the kick. So let's push some of that now. Yeah, there we go. Really bright, present kick. Got a lot of low end in there. Let's hear this EQ off and on to make sure we're not doing anything detrimental to it. To a really tight, modern, slick sounding kick drum. And of course we want to chuck on a high pass filter in here so that we don't muddy up the low end. So we've boosted at 50. I've heard that everything under 30 is irrelevant, so we'll set it at 30. Cool, I'm pretty pleased with that. Now let's mix the snare. Ignoring the fact that the snare has a really clear and present attack, sounds really snappy and tight already, we're going to compress it and then EQ it because we can really get some energy out of it. And listening in solo is really not giving us any perspective on this in terms of the mix. There's no kick and snare relationship, and that's another common mistake, one that I used to make all the time. Okay, so this is one of my favorite compressors. It's fast, and if you go for a really slow attack, really fast release, which is actually what it does for the snare preset here. If we were to go to snare, as you can see, the attack and release times are set this way, and I actually do this, but I'm going to overdo it for the purposes of making this mistake. Yeah, when I put the ratio up to 12, I actually hear a detrimental effect on the attack. I'll swap it again between a 4 and 12 ratio there, and you'll hear almost the snappiness of the attack disappear, and it starts to sound squashed. I've actually taken more life out of it by compressing it harder. And now for some EQ. So same EQ that we had with the kick, and I've heard that you want around the 200 hertz area for some sort of that lower punch of the snare. So let's push that in there now. There's actually a really horrible ring around dead on 200. So we'll move it around a little bit and we'll find that punch without that horrible woo, woo ring that it has. Yeah, that's sort of the best we can do. We'll dial it back a little bit. Cool, and now I've also heard that around sort of 800, it can sound a bit plasticky, so we're going to kill the 800 hertz area, or around there. Yeah, really tight now, isn't it? So now let's add some like attitude and aggression to it, and that'll either be 2.5 or 4.5K, so we'll find a good spot for that. Yeah, any more than that, and I think that it wouldn't be a mistake. You'd be purposely doing things wrong. So I think that's probably where it makes sense and is intuitively more aggressive. And we'll add some top end. We'll do a quick bypass of the EQ to see what we've done. Yeah, tight, bright, modern. And now the toms. Toms always sound better when you suck the mid-range out of them completely. So we'll grab an EQ and we'll cut deep and wide around here. Let's hear that. Yeah, that sounds really tight. If we bypass that. Yeah, how could that possibly not be better EQ'd this way? Okay, a weird one that I hear a lot, and I used to do this too, is the cymbals being too loud and not balanced properly. So I want to bring the overheads in. I think this possibly comes from maybe when you first gain stage and you first do like a rough balance before you start mixing, or you get used to how the drums sound when you're recording guitar or writing the song, because the overheads are always pretty loud in these samplers like GGD and stuff like that. So I think maybe, I don't know if people get used to it. And I used to do this too before I realized to bring my cymbals down, because when you listen to commercial records and some of the best like pop punk recordings and mixes, the cymbals are actually EQ'd really well, and because they're EQ'd so well, they can be brought down because they fit in place. They don't have to be so loud. So for the purposes of demonstrating mistakes, I'm going to keep them loud, keep them sort of in the way. Now we can start bringing everything in, because naturally we would do. So let's get these cymbals sitting where I often hear them, but that's not really where they should be. Cool, and we will EQ resonant frequencies out of these cymbals, again, which is good advice. So let's go hunting for lots and lots of resonant frequencies in these cymbals. Okay, I mean, this is obviously a bit tongue-in-cheek here. We would never have this many cuts, and I'm going overboard now to prove a point. But listen to how we've killed the life of these. A few of them would be good, but we've gone overboard there. But if you're one step ahead and you want to make a mistake I made a lot of the time as well, you think, well, I've made them duller, so now I'm going to boost the top end, but because I've made all those cuts, surely a top end boost will sound nice now. And all that will be left is the good stuff. So let's do that. And good advice is, if you think about 8K being your top frequency, then mixes will translate better because a lot of sort of smaller, cheaper speakers can't really accurately produce things over 8K. So we'll do a shelf at 8K, and that will give us all the information that we want if the speakers can handle it, but it'll also give us an 8K boost, so it's bright for those sort of smaller, cheaper speakers. What could go wrong? Now we have all the brightness and none of the harshness, right? And now we're also going to roll off the low end because they are overhead tracks. Perfect. Now we come to mix the room tracks. I actually find that rooms do an amazing job, especially in pop punk, of gelling the kit together and making it sound like a real kit. But I often hear mixes that don't have enough room in them because it does take away from the tightness and snappiness of the drums. So we're going to leave rooms quite low to demonstrate this point because I love room tracks in drums. I think they're really important, especially in program drums. However, you may have heard that it's cool to really trash up your rooms, or at least one of the room tracks. So we can compress these pretty hard to do that. And I do that when I'm mixing properly. So for this, we're going to use the FG Stress, which is a distressor plugin, a really good one from Slate Digital, and we're going to smash these. And you may have heard any problems that exist in the overheads will exist in the room. So why don't we copy over the EQ from the overheads? And we'll add a bit of saturation too. But let's grab this decapitator from Sound Toys and make it sound cool. Yeah, nice. So let's hear the drums together, and we're going to bring the rooms down to make sure the drums are really snappy from those shells, and so that I can also demonstrate my point of you need some room tracks in your drums. So you'd think, those rooms are making the cymbals too loud, they're ruining the balance, they're adding some of that mid-range back to the drums, which is killing the tightness. So no wonder you want to bring them down. Yeah, those drums sound cool, right? Now, you may think I've exaggerated, and I have, but the point is, in solo, those drums sounded good. Those drum moves mostly would have been an exaggerated version of what would make sense when you're mixing. But as soon as you bring the guitars and bass back in, the drums sound like they're from all different kits, recorded in different studios. They're not gelling together as one drum kit. So let's compare what we've just done to the completely unmixed drums that we started with. So this is our mix so far. And this is what we started with. They're not so overhyped, they sound cohesive, and you can tell that if we were to mix them properly, they would actually sound pretty good. And I would argue that we've made them worse than just doing nothing. Now, if you want to hear how this chorus is supposed to sound, this is it here. And just quickly, if you make music like this and you want me to mix your next release, then head over to my website, terrybeckleyrecording.com, hit me up via the contact form, and I will get back to you. If you want to see how I actually mix these drums properly, then you can watch this video here. And if you want to see all kinds of mixing tutorials on pop punk and emo and similar music to this, then head over to my channel. There's loads of videos there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you at the next one.